So the first part of our America topic is looking at westward expansion. So we're looking at the fact that America grew westwards and southwards between 1789 and 1838. And this happens mostly because the new settlers from Europe, which are mostly British at this point, are worried about the threat of other European empires. At the end of the day, they're threatened by the fact that European empires might take over the country that they have just done exactly the same to. And they're also quite fearsome of the natives as well, and the fact that they might put up a fight towards giving away some of their land as America starts to expand westwards as well. America also expanded at this point because the Americans believed that they needed their own land and they wanted to be self-sufficient. Now, if you imagine if we plunked our class in the middle of a new country, all of you would want to take up some of your own land and have your own ownership of land. So kind of makes sense. It's what they wanted. They want to be able to be rich, and they've got this kind of idea they can be because this land to them is unowned. We know that obviously it belongs to the natives, but the white Americans aren't going to see that. In the northwest, the growth of America actually causes some wars between Indians who live there, and in the south, expansion led to the creation of many new cotton plantations, where we know black Americans were working as slaves. This meant there was a greater need for slaves in the south as well. On the map, you can see the states and territories of the United States of America there. So we can see our original 13 states, and we can see the colony of Louisiana, which will soon be purchased, no doubt. And you can also see some of the territories of the future states of America that we will see later in our course. So what tensions arose as America expanded? Well, tensions arose in the east between the Indians and the white Americans, and that is because in 1783, when the British lost the war for the 13 colonies, as part of the peace treaty, they gave over 230 million acres of Indian land to this new America. This, obviously, Indian land had nothing to do with the new Americas and actually placed lots of Indian tribes under the control now of the US government through no fault of their own. In addition to this, the Southwest Territory, they set up farmland in Indian lands west of Virginia and the Carolinas, even before this war had even begun. So there was already early tension there with settlers on Indian lands. And also the settlers demanded help from the government to help attack Indians to take more land and also defend themselves from Indian attacks. But the government gave them no help, so this ultimately led to more vicious wars between Indians and white settlers. So we've looked slightly at the conflict in the east between the Indians and the white settlers, and this is something that George Washington massively feared. He feared that the Indians might attack the Northwest Territory of the US, and he was especially worried that the British might help support this attack. So he actually plummeted 80% of his government budget into a campaign against the Indians. And this led to a defeat in the Battle of Fallen Timbers in 1794, and also led to the signing of the Treaty of Greenville, which transferred over vast amounts of Northwest Territory land to new settlers, and ended up with the creation of new states such as Ohio, Kentucky and Tennessee. As the US spread, the Indians were then displaced even more and moved more west into regions, and then they were moving into areas of America which were already occupied by Indian tribes of other sorts, and this then led to more conflict, but this was conflict between the Native Americans themselves. So looking now at our white Americans, well, a big part of the reasons that they moved westward and America expanded as a whole was because of land and profit. Farmers were really interested in land and wanting to own their own land, therefore they could vote and make money from it. But a lot of the land was bought up by land speculators who made huge profits. by buying lots of cheap land from the government and then selling it on to small-scale farmers. This worked in their favour because the government would only sell 640 acres of land at a time, and most people that were settled in America were incredibly poor. They'd gone there to make themselves a living. But most families struggled to make $100 a year, so they couldn't really scrape together $640 to buy a section, just one section of land. So thousands of white Americans were inspired by the promise of land in the West, but few could actually own their own land, and it was actually the land speculators that profited mostly from this expansion. This then led to squatters on the land, so Americans that would settle on land, farm it for as long as they could until they were kicked off by a bailiff, who would obviously take the land from them and attempt to charge them for it. So overall expansion for white Americans, if you were rich, was good. If you were poorer, not so much. So land also related to power and democracy. So owning your own land, as I said previously, meant that you could vote. And that was the idea of Thomas Jefferson. So he created a system to divide and sell land really, really quickly. So dividing land up into neat 6 mile square kind of grids, and then selling these for $1 to $2 at a time. But once again, this meant that the land speculators could profit quite substantially. In 1789 as well, the US relied entirely on being able to trade across the Atlantic Ocean, but the new nation wanted to become a major player in the Pacific Ocean as well. So in order to do this, he needed to purchase more land, and he was very lucky in that he was able to purchase the Louisiana Territory from the French for just $15 million, which is a very tiny price for 530 million acres of land in Louisiana, and also to get the port of New Orleans too. So again, land was another reason that America expanded. So once the land of the Louisiana Purchase was purchased, Jefferson ordered his government to find opportunities to trade with the West. And then we get Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, who set on the task of exploring the new lands, and they were very successful in the fur trade. They set out in May 1804 and followed the Missouri River into the Rocky Mountains and made their way into the unclaimed territory in the Pacific coast. They had a native guide who was a Native American, and they made maps to help fur traders hunt beaver to sell all over Europe, and ultimately made lots and lots of money. And this encouraged more traders to head westwards. There was another reason people were moving and expanding westwards. To help us to answer the question, what tensions arose as America expanded, I would like you to have a go at this suggested activity. So you can create this mind map and just jot down some ideas about Indians, land and democracy, land and trade, and land and profit, and how they caused tensions in early expansion. Well done on your effort on this topic so far, on what tensions arose as America expanded between 1789 and 1838. We have found out that the tensions that arose were between Indians and white Americans over the expansion of settlers into the West, and we've also found out that there was tension between white Americans themselves over buying up tracts of land, squatters and land speculators. The next video is about why slavery expanded.